Hello there, my name's Brodie McLeod and you're watching another one of my banal, uninteresting screen recorded videos on YouTube, hoping to get at least 15 views on these ones. So yeah, pretty stoked about that. I've had a very shit day today on Nash Ward at Signet Stokes Hospital in Weston-super-Mare. I've been moved to room 5 because I lost a fight with the door in room 6 after staff sort of belligerently insulted me, demeaned me and degraded me and completely just sort of provoked me into a state of apoplectic rage due to their impertinent and sort of pretextually provocative behaviour, along with a whole load of other serious crimes that have been committed. I'll leave a link in the description for you to explore any of those. Today, well, I'll tell you a story. Since I first came to this hospital in 2024, I bought myself a laptop. It's called a Yep Book. Had like 16 gigs of RAM and a pretty good processor. It's like some random Chinese name. You probably haven't heard of a Yep Book before. Anyway, it had a lot of evidence on it regarding misconduct at the hospital, and unfortunately, it transpired that after a while, I woke up one day and the screen on the laptop was cracked. You can probably just see the cracks there in the corner of the screen. So I bought myself a monitor so I can continue to use the computer. I'll let you have a little look at that Samsung monitor there, which I used to plug into the computer for a short time with a remote keyboard, wireless Bluetooth keyboard and mouse and stuff. Then eventually they went into the settings and disabled the setting in Windows 11 which allows you to cast to a screen, so the laptop became completely useless. I bought another one for about 150 quid on Amazon. It was a HP EliteBook 830, but it's very small, and although it was made of metal, had rugged construction. It wasn't that great. It was like B grade, kind of refurbished, considered the cheapest one on Amazon. Anyway, I ordered a bunch of furniture. I've ordered some things. I was due to be discharged quite soon. And so I ordered some things from IKEA, homewares like kind of cooking pots and plates and cutlery and utensils and, various different things. Just sort of homewares. I also ordered a chair from Amazon, right? And this chair was ordered on like the 2nd of April. And by like the 8th of April, I still hadn't received it. So I contacted Amazon and said, look, the buyer hasn't messaged me anything. It was Prime delivery, meant to be delivered within 24 hours on my Amazon Prime. So I want you to do something about it. So Amazon used their A to Z guarantee to send me back this desk chair, right? To refund me for this desk chair, which I hadn't received. They said that I could buy a better one. So I sold the desk chair on Facebook Marketplace, and they didn't like that because they've been denying the fact that I'm here in the hospital, and the police have completely ignored the narrative of complaints that I've sent to them involving really serious crimes, not just sort of human error or misconduct that can be allayed to sort of like someone trying to do their job properly and making an honest mistake, but a systemic failure to complete my paperwork correctly, make sure that the information commissioners, the ICB Integrated Care Board was correctly applied. Because I lived in Bristol, I put these complaints through to AWP and Devon Partnership Trust, who they tried to muscle in and get to fund my detention. And then they put in a social worker who's basically working off the books, didn't want a paper trail, and was trying to sort of effectively, it looked like, and according to research I did, traffic me quietly into a destination of their choice without any paperwork. South Gloucester City Council put it in writing to me on Twitter. They said, any adult social worker should give you their mobile phone number and an email address at nhs.net. If they don't, this is highly circumspect. And they went on to say in the public domain in writing that there is no record of a adult social care worker working with my case. She'd attended multiple ward rounds and had worked, with us through Teams, and had a face-to-face meeting with a colleague too. Then when I found out that she was moonlighting effectively, they trumped up this pretext that I'd sent malicious communications to this social worker. But when I said, you know, I'm open to investigation, call the police, do your digital forensics checks, I want to work with the social worker, she was sound, like I had nothing against her. She was a nice person. Anyway, I sold this chair and they didn't like it at all. I sold it like once the chair arrived after about 10 days. Amazon had already refunded it. It was like a 30 quid cheap desk chair, and I'd ordered myself another one, much more comfortable with lumbar support and a little headrest, and it was a few quid more. Amazon were really kind and allowed me to get one for a few quid more. Anyway, I sold my laptop and I sold my smartwatch at CEX like about sort of a week ago. And they both got itineraries of being delivered to me at this hospital on my Amazon account, along with the chair, which I then sold, which creates sort of quite a firm and corollary narrative that I'm here in the building and there's a financial paper trail, which they seem to not want to do. One of the other things they did, which was really serious, was not update my GP record with the NHS as to the antipsychotic injections I was taking, the oral medications that I was taking. If I'd been hit by a bus in the street and I was taken to A&E, they would be going in blind. So this wasn't a mistake of just one person or two people that forgot to do some work at the end of the handover shift or write up some notes. It was every single person. I only got a subject access request from July 2024 when I was first admitted to the hospital here, and May 25, but there was just nothing on it. The whole hospital record was blank. I'd had vaccinations, I'd had ointments, I'd had oral medications, benzodiazepines, and really strong antipsychotic injections, which if you get prescribed things like erythromycin, can prove fatal, cause fatal heart attacks if I was, you know, collapsed in the street and taken to A&E. So with the combination of an NHS trust funding me, which are 100 miles away, even though I've been placed by NHS into 2 properties in Bristol, starting in 2021 and ending with that tenancy halfway through 2025. 4 years I lived in Bristol, and place of ordinary residence should determine that. Anyway, cut a long story short, I bought myself a new laptop off Amazon. Again, sort of B stock, but it's a Samsung Galaxy Book 4. It's quite a nice one. Works a lot quicker than the old one, and it's bigger too, so I can sort of work with the screen a bit more competently. They didn't like that either, because, well, I don't really know why they didn't like that, but they brought me into a financial assessment today with a social worker, my responsible clinician, and a ward clerk. I started asking me questions about my finances. How much did I sell my laptop for? Why did I sell it? Have I got financial capacity to manage my own money? And I got quite insulted by their kind of like patronizing and condescending tone. I sort of just said, this is none of your business. I retain capacity. You know, you think, even though I'm unlawfully detained or falsely imprisoned in actual fact, you know, I sort of said, on the pretext that we're going to play by the rules, you still don't have a right to investigate me, even if I made an unwise decision and bought something for a lot of money or sold something for less than it was worth. I've still got a desk and a desk chair and a bunch of stuff from IKEA not in the main security store, but in one of the corridors around the corner where they've got this other security store. I took some photos of that stuff today. You can see it here, which I was considering. There's the desk that I bought to go into this supported accommodation, which I was going to be hopefully within a couple of weeks going into, with a meeting coming up quite soon. There's the office chair that I bought to replace the one that was late. There's a picture of a star in my eye. You don't need to see that at all. Yeah, I don't have a problem with being unable to sort of manage my finances or make sure that I don't get ripped off or extorted. I'm not vulnerable in that sense, and I'm totally responsible with my money and I manage it very well. I'm not financially vulnerable or a kind of capacity risk. Anyway, to cut a long story short, this is already 9 minutes of introduction. I got invited into this meeting today, and first they asked about the chair, and they said, why did you sell the chair? What was your intention? Are you going to sell the other things in your storage, and if so, for how much? And I said, this is none of your business. Like, whatever I do with my possessions is completely up to me. If I want to sell it for a fucking penny, it doesn't make any difference to your capacity to treat my mental health. It's nothing to do with mental capacity. It's admission to hospital purely. They only have a right to mental health. Then halfway through, this was the main shit bit, right? So sort of cut to the chase. There was this, the consultant started saying, what about your gold chain? And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah, like, you know, your gold chain. You sold your gold chain, Brody. You know, how much did you sell it for? Look, I made a video pretty much every day for the last 2 years since I've been in hospital. Not one video where you see me wearing a gold chain. I've never owned a gold chain. They were literally just trying to invent a pretext that I'd been selling valuable items for nominal amounts of money and was financially vulnerable. I responded to her quite vitriolically and, you know, pretty much told her to fuck off. Because she was talking bollocks, and she knew that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was obvious from her micro expressions and her tone, her intonation, her kind of like subservient, supine arrogance, and sort of supercilious, vacuous of you know, all rationale and morals and accountability. It was she was just behaving like an awful criminal person, and very unprofessional. Very poor reviews. I'd like to change my consultant, but I can't do that at the moment. But I walked through the emails I sent today because they have not provided me with what I wanted. So the first one, the first email that I sent was a formal notice regarding financial autonomy and presumption of capacity under the Mental Capacity Act 2005. I said, dear ward manager, and also to put in a IMHA CC'd in, I'm writing to formally address the recent questioning and assessment by my consultant regarding my private financial matters, specifically my decision to sell my own personal property furniture online ahead of my discharge. I find this line of questioning invasive and a gross overreach of the hospital's statutory remit. I'm therefore laying out the exact statutory frameworks, policies and legislation that govern my rights in this situation, which I expect to be respected moving forward. So the legal framework, Mental Health Act versus Mental Capacity Act. Please be reminded of the legal distinction between the Mental Health Act 1983 and the Mental Capacity Act 2005. The Mental Health Act Section 3, this legislation provides the authority for my current detention and compulsory medical treatment. It does not strip me of my financial rights. Section 3 grants the hospital no automatic authority over my property, my bank accounts, or my right to buy and sell personal items. The Mental Capacity Act 2005, this is the legislation that governs my ability to make decisions, including financial ones. So key legislation and policy, one is the Mental Capacity Act 2005, Section 1, the core principles. I direct your attention to the foundational principles of the Mental Capacity Act. Section 1.2, a person must be assumed to have capacity unless it is established that he lacks capacity. That certainly hasn't been established. They're literally making up reasons to try and make it look like I've lost capacity, to try and insulate themselves from verifiable accountability based on my false imprisonment. So Section 4 of the MCA quotes, a person is not to be treated as unable to make a decision merely because he makes an unwise decision. So even if I had sold my furniture for a penny, that still doesn't give them the right to assess my capacity or reduce my capacity financially, unless the clinical team has conducted a formal time and decision specific capacity assessment under the MCA proving that I lack the mental capacity to manage my finances or sell my own property. The law presumes I have full capacity to do so. Even if the consultant considers my sale to be unwise, the law explicitly states that this is not grounds to intervene. So they shouldn't even have made the assessment, even if I'd sold the chair that arrived a week late that I'd already been refunded for less than it was worth, which I didn't. I mean, I sold it, you know, it's a 30 quid desk chair. You know, I sold it for a quick sale. I just didn't need it, you know. It was just taking up space in the hospital storeroom. Section 2 of the Mental Health Act, this element number 2 from the Mental Health Act 1983 Code of Practice, which is just the sort of guidance for mental health patients under the guiding principles of the MHA Code of Practice, Chapter 1, specifically the principle of least restrictive option and maximising independence. Patients must be encouraged to maintain their independence as much as possible. Controlling a competent patient's first personal finances directly contradicts this statutory guidance. Then you've got CQC regulations. As a provider, You are bound by CQC regulation under Regulation 9, Person-Centred Care, and Regulation 10, Dignity and Respect of the Health and Social Care Act 2008, Regulated Activities, Regulations 2014. You must treat service users with respect and ensure their autonomy and independence are maximised. Unwarranted interference in my private financial affairs without a legal basis is a breach of my dignity and autonomy. My formal position, if there are any further attempts to assess my financial well-being or dictate my online sales, my position is as followed. Under Section 1, Part 2 of the Mental Capacity Act 2005, I am legally presumed to have the capacity to manage my own finances and property. 2, my current status under Section 3 of the Mental Health Act relates strictly to compulsory medical treatment. It does not act as a blanket deprivation of my financial autonomy or property rights. Unless you're formally assessing me as lacking the capacity to manage my property under the Mental Capacity Act and are prepared to document the objective evidence that my mental disorder makes me unable to understand, retain, use or weigh information regarding the sale of my own furniture, my finances remain a strictly private matter. Not only did I not have an unwise decision, but she tried to invent a pretext to evidence that this business with the gold chain. Portion 3 of that formal position, section 4, I understand the hospital has a safeguarding duty to ensure I'm not being exploited. I assure you I'm fully aware of the market value of the items I'm selling and am managing these transactions safely. Beyond that, how I dispose of my personal property is entirely my own prerogative. I expect this email to be kept on patient record and for the clinical team to adjust their conduct accordingly to comply with the Mental Capacity Act. I then sent another email, which was a notice of intent to prosecute, falsify clinical records and immediate subject access requests. So there was a ward clerk in this meeting. I spoke to her this afternoon, and on the way into office I said, did you take notes down? Did you mention the gold chain that was invented and fabricated by the consultant to try and make it look like, when I said I couldn't even remember selling it, you know, they were going to try and use that as ammunition in this viscerally corrupt shithole of a hospital. So I sent this other email at sort of 3:20, which is headed urgent notice of intent to prosecute, falsify clinical records and immediate subject access requests. So I sent this to the ward manager and Avon and Somerset Police too. I'm writing to formally report a severe breach of clinical and legal standards by my consultant psychiatrists and to notify all parties of my intent to pursue prosecution based on the deliberate falsification of my medical record. During a recent assessment regarding my financial well-being, the consultant completely fabricated an issue regarding a gold chain. I state for the absolute record, I have never owned a gold chain in my life. There is zero evidence of this item ever existing because the claim is a complete factual fabrication. Demand for immediate record. So I'm requesting all written notes made by the ward clerk who attended this assessment to be provided to me with immediate effect as part of an urgent subject access request, because this information is already digitised or written and can be easily printed off the printer located less than 2 metres away from the clerk's desk in Signet's Nash Ward office. There's no administrative barrier to fulfilling this request. I expect the notes to be reasonably provided to me by 5 p.m. Grounds for police investigation and prosecution. I'm directing the Avon and Somerset Police to append this incident to my existing active police report regarding false imprisonment and willful neglect. This is not a clinical error or a misunderstanding. It is the intentional manufacture of a false narrative designed to justify unlawful intervention under the Mental Capacity Act. This fabrication constitutes a police investigation and warrants prosecution under the following legal parameters. The first one is Forgery and Counterfeiting Act 1981. So under Section 1 of this Act is a criminal offence to make false instruments with the intention that it be accepted as genuine to another's prejudice. By knowingly compiling a medical report or a clinical note containing fabricated assets, in this case a gold chain, the consultant has created a false instrument. The clear intent is to induce hospital managers, the clinical team, and potentially legal authorities to accept this false narrative as genuine, thereby prejudicing my financial autonomy, my liberty, and my standing. Second crime, number 2, was misconduct in a public office. That's a common law offence. Consultant psychiatrist holds a position of immense public trust and statutory power over my liberty. Willfully falsifying clinical notes to manufacture a safeguarding concern or to portray erratic financial behaviour is a gross abuse of that power. Using their office to retaliate against my assertion of my legal rights or to unlawfully extend their control over my private property meets the threshold for this serious common law offence. Crime number 3 is breach of the Data Protection Act 2018, UK GDPR. So the recording of this fabricated gold chain is a direct violation of Article 5 of the GDPR, which mandates that personal data must be accurate. Under Article 16, right to rectification, and formally demanding that this claim immediately be struck from my record or explicitly marked as a disputed fabrication. The intentional logging of false data to build a clinical rationale is unlawful. And then there's GMC guidance. I haven't got her name or her GMC number because she wouldn't provide it to me when asked several weeks ago, which questions her fitness to practice as a consultant on that basis. Then there was the last email that I sent, which was at 6:30. I actually had, after about 3:30, I fell asleep for several hours until about 6:30. When I woke up and said, where are the paperworks that the legal clerk agreed to print out for me? They said that you couldn't have them and it had to be deferred to a third party, which is bullshit. You know, if it's an easy to supply, you know, I'm not asking for all my medical records. I'm asking for, 2-3 sides of A4, which the ward clerk took during the notes, in which she openly admitted to me. She noted the gold chain and I said this was completely fabricated. So I said, dear ward manager, I'm writing to formally instruct you to immediately print and provide me with the ward clerk notes taken during today's financial assessment. These documents directly relate to an active criminal complaint regarding the deliberate fabrication of clinical records, specifically the entirely fictional claim made by my consultant that I possess a gold chain. As these notes contain evidence of this fabrication, which is being used to justify unlawful intervention into my financial autonomy, their preservation and immediate release are critical. Your staff on the ward are currently refusing to print these 3 pages of notes, attempting to deflect my legally binding verbal subject access request. And it was not just verbal, but written as well, as you've seen in that previous email, by claiming that it must go to the MHA office or requires third-party authority. This is a deliberate misdirection, and I've written proof from your own management that this is a known unlawful obstruction used by your staff. So on Monday, the 29th of September 2025, my nurse, Dawn Reason, attempted to block a previous data request by using the exact same excuse, stating in her email, as previously discussed, this is to go through the correct channels such as MHA office, my responsible clinician and the hospital manager and data protection. I was asking for my section papers at this time. This was definitively debunked that very same day by a lady called Michelle Crump, who's head of digital operations at Signet Healthcare, who replied all staff involved, including the hospital manager, with the following verbatim instruction. They said the data protection team can and will process any SARs received. However, you are not required to request approval from the data protection team to release statutory mental health paperwork to a detained service user. Do not attempt to run this fabricated bureaucratic deflection on me again. You do not need third-party authority to print 3 pages of notes regarding my own fictional property. I formally notified you at 15:25 today of my subject access request and set a deadline of 5 p.m. for these notes to be printed to ensure the data was not tampered with. Because you are now actively delaying past that deadline and withholding the service, I must remind you that for your own direct criminal liability in this matter, I quote the Data Protection Act 2018, Section 173, alteration, etc. of personal data to prevent disclosure. Verbatim, it's an offence for a person listed in subsection 4 to alter, deface, block, erase, destroy or conceal information with the intention of preventing disclosure of all or part of the information that the person making the request would have been entitled to receive. By continuing to refuse to provide this paperwork after a legally valid subject access request has been made, you are actively concealing information to prevent disclosure. By doing so, you're committing a criminal offence yourself. I instruct you to go to the printer in the ward office, print the notes, hand them to me immediately. If you refuse, I require you to open my clinical file right now and explicitly document your name and your refusal to comply with this SAR so that your actions can be added to my active report with Avon and Somerset Police regarding data concealment. If you look in my sent files, I actually forwarded this message on to the ward manager, and I said, I'm writing to formally instruct you to immediately print and provide me with the ward clerk notes taken during today's financial assessment. These documents directly relate to an active criminal complaint regarding the deliberate fabrication of clinical records, specifically the entirely fictional claim made by my consultant that I possess a gold chain. As these notes contain evidence of this fabrication which is being used to justify unlawful intervention into my financial autonomy, their preservation and immediate release are critical. Your staff on the ward are currently refusing to print these 3 pages of notes, attempting to deflect my legally binding verbal subject access request and written one by claiming that it must go to the Mental Health Act Administrator's office or that it requires third-party authority. This is a deliberate misdirection, and I have the written proof from your own management that this is a known unlawful obstruction tactic used by your staff. On Monday, 29th of December, my nurse, Dawn Reason, attempted to block a previous data request using the exact same excuses, stating in the email, as previously discussed, this has to go through the correct channels, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, they've got a duty to reply to it. They haven't replied to it. I don't know what the fuck that notification was about, but I don't give 2 fucking monkeys. I've got a new laptop. I got it for a bargain price for what it is, and I don't have a fucking gold chain, and I don't need to be assessed under the Mental Capacity Act, especially with completely fucking falsified information from a criminal and unprofessional person. I mean, I say criminal with the scope of the internet's, researched evidence. I don't know that she's a criminal, but as far as I'm concerned, these acts appear to be based on the interpretation of legislation and verbatim quotes from law, policy, legislation and guidance on the matter, completely irreparably wrong. And there isn't really any excuse for inventing a pretext. What she was doing was lying through her fucking teeth to try and insulate herself and everybody else on the ward from having to formally admit that I'm here at the premises. The police have been informed of this issue, and they have tried to phone the ward several times, I believe. I think these staff are saying that I'm not interested, or that I'm too busy, or that I don't want to talk to them. If you are a police officer, or if you're a member of security services, or a journalist, or a solicitor, I definitely want to speak to the police. I definitely want people to investigate this. I am in extremely vulnerable, compromised position due to the criminality of Signet Hospital's staff and various NHS trusts who've been acting criminally. Have a look through my YouTube videos for more on this. Thanks for watching for 27 minutes. All the best.